Chapter 13. Sean! I didn't look up from feeding Nicker. I was afraid he would yank the bottle right out of my hands if I did. Yeah, I asked absently. When he's done eating, just make a quick round of the stalls and pick up what needs picking up before you come in for dinner, Mr. H said. Can't it wait till tomorrow? I asked. My stomach had been gurgling all afternoon. I really didn't want to lose my appetite now. Sean, Mr. H sighed. One thing you've got to learn about this ranch is things need to be done when they need to be done, not after they need to be done. The animals depend on us. How would you like to spend the night in your room if it was full of, all right? I could see where this conversation was going, and it really wasn't doing anything for me visually. I'll do one last pickup round before I come in for dinner. By the way, I asked casually, what's for dinner? I don't know. What are you making? Now I did look up. Huh? Now that you're staying here for a while, you'll have to help out with the cooking on a regular basis, and tonight's as good a night as any to get started. I rolled my eyes and tried to fight back the angry words. He was taking advantage of me. Does all this count for my hours? I asked, trying but failing to keep the frustration out of my voice. Of course, he said easily. It all counts. He left, probably going to sit and chew on his pipe and listen to the radio in his easy chair. The fact I had 3 chores to complete before I could sit down and relax kept buzzing around in my head. And even then, the angry wasp in my ear whispered, You won't be allowed to relax. Oh no, he'll make sure you go up and spend a few hours doing homework. Nicker butted my chest and whinnied at me. I absently pulled on his ear, scratching the side of his stubby mane. I took a deep breath. Might as well get started. As Mr. H had pointed out to me on the first happy day here, the stalls aren't going to muck themselves. I found the shovel with no problem, and I also discovered a beat-up wheelbarrow that seemed accustomed to carrying manure around. As I made the round of stalls, my anger towards Mr. H began to fade. Very few of the stalls had anything in them. I guess that's why he hadn't felt bad giving me this last job tonight. That might also explain why the paddock takes so long to clean. I had actually started to whistle a little when I hit the 3rd stall that had a pile in it. I swung the stall door open and then froze. It was Manda. I hadn't seen her since the first night. I hadn't even thought about her, really, except when James had suggested trying to put Nicker back with her. She turned her head slowly, arrogantly. She was a pretty mare, probably one of the prettiest there, but I couldn't stand the sight of her. Her red coat glistened like satin, and her long mane and tail hung as elegantly as if someone had brushed them for hours. Mr. H had described her as having good lines. I didn't know much about horses, but I had to admire her graceful, slender legs and fine cut of her face. She swished her tail, attitude in every inch of her body. Her eyes, while they were the same deep brown as Nicker's, were cold and uncaring. There was no spark of liveliness in them. She couldn't care less that I was there, any more than she cared that her son was now dependent on strangers for his life. I took a deep breath and shifted the shovel in my hands. My fingers began to tingle, and I realized I had been gripping the handle so hard my knuckles were white. I also had raised the shovel as if I intended to strike her with it. This was not good. Screw it, I said to myself. Let her sleep with her crap in her stall. It's no less than she deserves. I shut the stall door. She flickered an ear back, forward again, and then turned back to her pile of hay. I stood there for a few minutes, just staring at her. I wanted her to feel my anger, wanted her to know how much I really despised her. She never looked up at me again, only swished her tail once or twice slowly. But I knew that she knew I was there. She was just showing me how little she cared, how little I mattered. I turned and completed my round of the barn in 15 minutes. It took me a while because I stopped to pet the horses whose stalls had gifts in them. They were all pretty interested in me. 2 bobbed their heads up and down over their doors as they saw me coming, and were actually kind of a pain as I was trying to shovel because they kept getting in the way. One of them was a little bashful, but after I introduced myself, he allowed me to pet him, and he snorted when I turned to leave. I had to walk back past Amanda's stall to take the shovel and wheelbarrow back. She was still in the corner, one leg bent so her horseshoe reflected the light. I hesitated. If I went in tonight without cleaning all the stalls, would anyone really be able to tell? It was, after all, just one stall, and surely some of the other horses would have to take a dump before the morning, so who's to say her stall wasn't clean when I checked it? I sighed. I'd know, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. I knew that when Mr. H asked me this evening if the stalls were clean, that I wouldn't be able to lie. Well, I could probably say the words, but he'd know I was lying. I don't know how he'd know, but he would. And he'd throw a guilt trip on me. He'd taken me in. Sure, he'd worked my butt off, but that's what comes with community service. But he had done more than just make me work, and I knew it. Maybe I'll get lucky, I thought, grabbing the handle and opening the stall door. Maybe she'll continue to ignore me, and I can get the load in one shovelful and get out of here. So far, that seemed reasonable. She didn't even turn her head when I opened the door. I quickly stepped inside, trying to be quiet, willing myself to become invisible. I loaded the shovel, but she had left quite a pile, and I would have to come back. I stepped out into the corridor and dropped the load into the wheelbarrow. When I turned around, I flinched. Apparently she can move quickly and quietly, too. She was already walking through the door. I hadn't even heard the straw rustle when she moved. "Where do you think you're going?" I demanded. I stepped forward, intending to just shove her chest and get her back into the stall. She laid her ears back against her head and bared her teeth at me. Something inside me snapped. I didn't feel it right away, but something inside me really snapped. I lifted the shovel. She shook her head back and forth, teeth still bared. I could just see her thinking that people had tried to scare her with shovels before, so it really wasn't going to work this time. Her eyes had an evil glint to them, and I was reminded of how she had ripped Mr. Hassler's shirt and arm the night Nicker was born. I turned the shovel so I was holding it above the blade with the handle over my shoulder like a bat. I had no intention of just trying to scare her. She snaked her head in, going for my thigh. The handle arced up and over, and I brought it down squarely on her muzzle. I stopped putting force into it about halfway through the arc, allowing gravity to finish the job. I didn't know what kind of reaction to expect, but the last one I was looking for was a renewed attack on her part. She lunged for me. I wasn't ready for it, and she knocked me clear into the next stall. In the process, she used her teeth to try to remove my shoulder. I couldn't believe how much it hurt. I jumped up, never really feeling myself hit the ground. I grabbed the shovel, this time just at the top of the handle, and brought the shovel up as hard as I could into the middle of her rib cage. I hit her with the broad side of the shovel, not with the edge, and it felt, rather than heard, a solid thunk as it connected with her. She gave a startled grunt with a whooshing sound, like I had knocked all the air out of her. It stopped the forward motion of her head. I was relieved, because it had looked like she was getting ready to take a large chunk out of my leg. Amanda dropped her head down close to the ground and began to shake all over. Whether from fear or rage, I couldn't tell. I waited for a minute, the anger in me slowly boiling over. "Go on, get back in your stall." I had started out in a moderate tone, but by the end of it I was shouting. Her head came up slowly, nostrils flaring, ears pinned back again. This time, though, I wasn't playing defensively. I brought the shovel across the front of me and gave all of my strength to a backhand swing to her chest. She jerked her head up even higher and reared up on her hind legs. I swung again, hitting the soft underside of her belly. She came down quickly. I started thrusting the shovel at her like a huge sword. When Amanda backed into the stall wall, she hesitated and began to turn slightly. "No way," I panted. "Not this time. You're not getting out of here. Get back, you rotten tramp. Get back," I hollered, still using the shovel like a lance. Amanda backed into the stall, no hesitation or arrogance anymore. She was beat, and she knew it. I knew it too, but I kept after her, kept driving her back into her stall until she was huddled into the farthest corner, trying to escape the blows of the shovel. I lost all track of time. It could have been 3 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 hours. I hit her again and again with the shovel handle. I yelled at her, cursed her, cried because of her. Steel arms caught mine in the middle of one of my weakening swings. A vise of muscle came around my midsection and pinned both my arms to my side. "Sweet Jesus," I heard Mr. Hassler whispering from the corridor behind me. I stopped fighting. I blinked twice, trying to clear my sight. There's no way that I saw what I thought I saw. Amanda was down in the straw, bleeding from several places. Her body was shaking violently. The grip around me was continuing to tighten. I yelped involuntarily. "Let him go," Mr. Hassler told James. "Sean, come inside the house. We'll need to call a couple doctors." For a minute or two, it didn't seem that James was going to listen to Mr. H. It seemed that he was just going to continue squeezing the breath out of me until I fell to the ground as Amanda had. When had that happened? I wondered. I don't remember seeing her fall. Slowly, ever so slowly, James released me. I turned and stumbled as I went to the door. When I reached out to grab the wall for support, I bit back a cry. The sharp pain in my shoulder reminded me of what Amanda had done to me. I kept my eyes down. I couldn't look at Mr. Hassler. I knew there would be a fire in his eyes. I knew I had crossed an unforgivable line, but I didn't remember crossing it. I didn't mean to hurt her. I had just wanted to get her back into her stall. If she had gotten out, I would have been in trouble, so I tried to put her back. But then she had Blindly I followed Mr. Hassler through the barn. Nicker nickered when we passed his stall, but I couldn't look at him. Just thinking about him and Amanda made me sick. The cold air hit me, stinging my face, sending new needles of pain into the open wound on my shoulder. I stopped just outside the door and threw up. I don't even remember walking up to the house. The bright fluorescent glare of the kitchen lights made me squint. I sank down into the nearest chair, too drained to move. I felt stunned, and the stupid thing was, it was all my fault. Mr. Hassler picked up the phone, and after he finished dialing, he took the receiver to the sink. "Hello, Doc, it's Dave." He pulled a towel out of the drawer. "Yeah, I know, I'm becoming a regular. Need you to come over here as soon as you can." "No, not another delivery. Casper's still holding on. I'd rather wait till you get out here." "Well, it could probably wait till tomorrow, but I'd rather not." He finished running warm water over the towel and was wringing it out. "I really appreciate it, Doc. Just go straight to the barn. I've got to run into town. No, you know I wouldn't have leave my horses if I could help it, but I've got to run Sean into the hospital." "Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks again." He hung up and immediately began dialing the phone again. He looked at me quickly. "Take your shirt off," he whispered. "Steve, Dave Hassler. Sorry to bother you so late, but I was wondering if you could meet me at the hospital in a few minutes." "Hold on a second." I was struggling to get my t-shirt off. My shoulder was burning and throbbing and too stiff to move. Mr. H grabbed some scissors and in one quick motion cut the shirt in half down the front and then started to help me take it off like a jacket. "Steve, no, it's not for me." Mr. Hassler gently pulled the shirt away from the wound. "Yes, young Sean needs your assistance again. I don't think it's too serious, but it'll take a few stitches at least." I was shaking my head, but Mr. H was ignoring me. "This time you can talk to him, and that'll save you from a follow-up trip back out here tomorrow." "Well, yeah, I guess you'll have to do another follow-up trip anyway, but you can save it for later." "Great, we'll see you in 15 minutes." Mr. Hassler hung up the phone and started out of the kitchen. He turned and called to me. "Put that towel on your shoulder and use as much pressure as you can stand. I'll be right back." "I don't need to go to the hospital," I muttered, biting my lip as I placed the towel on my shoulder. I stood up and held onto the table for a minute before making my way across the kitchen to the front door. Mr. H had amazing hearing. "Yes, you do, Sean. My guess is you'll get close to 20 stitches." He was coming down the stairs, putting his wallet in his pocket and carrying the jacket I had been using. He swung the jacket across my shoulders and put his hand on my back to guide me out the door. We got in the truck and I sat stiffly, waiting for him to rip into me. He was silent. I stole a glance at him. He was concentrating on something more than driving, but he didn't really look angry. Concerned and anxious, yes, but angry and tense, no. My mind was whirling. Aren't you going to say anything? I finally asked. He glanced over at me. What would you like me to say? I stared at him. He was serious. He wasn't mocking me or being sarcastic. Aren't you going to yell at me or tell me what a jerk I am or let me have it somehow? I was at a loss for words. Do you think you're a jerk? He asked softly. I stared at the dashboard. Dirt didn't even come close to what I was thinking I was. Is there a reason I should yell at you? Weren't you the one who was just in the barn with me? I asked in disbelief. Yes, he said easily. Is there a reason I should yell at you? I don't believe this, I said, shaking my head. I was totally out of control. I beat the crap out of a defenseless animal. It was awful. I trailed off. I couldn't describe it. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Don't you have anything to say to me? I asked again. Sean, I have lots of things to say to you. I don't, however, have anything to yell at you about. I don't understand, I said. He sighed. I shouldn't have left you alone with Manda. That was my mistake. Not only is she a very temperamental and occasionally violent mare, I also knew that you had some resentment towards her. I had no idea it was that extreme, but I was aware of it. It was an oversight on my part, but you and Manda are the ones that are paying for it right now. I'm pretty sure that hinges on my mouth broke at this time, because I had a hard time picking my jaw up off the ground. You weren't there. It was my fault, not yours. God, I don't even know how to explain what I did. I leaned my head back and shut my eyes. The pain in my shoulder was getting worse. I think I might know how to explain it, Sean. I looked over at him. How would you know? He shrugged a little. I said I might. I didn't say for sure that I knew. I would know if you would just talk to me. I talked to you, I said a little defensively. Yes, you talked to me, but not about important things in your life. Not about you. Not about your family. He paused, looking at me out of the corner of his eye. I think, he began carefully, that you did what you did to Manda because of what she did to Nicker and because of what your mother did to you. I felt myself tensing all over. I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to relax and not explode again. Mr. H cleared his throat roughly. Frank related some parts of your conversation this afternoon. Not all of it, he added quickly. Just the parts he thought I needed to know, and, his voice dropped to a whisper, I told him I suspected your mother might be abusive. Again, silence filled the cab. We pulled into the hospital parking lot. Neither of us spoke as he found a spot and turned off the engine. As I reached out to open the door, he stopped me by placing his hand gently on my uninjured shoulder. Sean, you'll be seeing Dr. Morris tonight. He's the one who saw you the other morning. You were unconscious at the time, so he didn't get to talk to you. He's pretty concerned about how you received your injuries. Mr. H's steady gaze never faltered, and his voice never changed. He's going to ask you a lot of questions about your mom. He's also required by law to report any suspected child abuse. I know you've had a hard time talking to people. Dr. Morris is a good man who would like to help you. I hope you can talk to him, even if you can't talk to me. I wanted to put my head on Mr. H's shoulder right then and just bawl out my entire story. But he was already turning around, letting himself out of the truck, and I had to open the door and follow him into the hospital. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs and clear my head. I looked up into the stars and watched them sparkle, and then I hurried after Mr. Hassler into the hospital lights. Dr. Morris turned out to be a pretty nice doctor. Maybe it was just because he seemed so young. Every other doctor I've ever seen looked to be about 15 years past retirement, but Dr. Morris couldn't have been more than 40. Hi, Sean. Hi, Dr. Morris. You probably don't remember, but we've met once before. I tried to smile. So I hear. He turned to Mr. H. I'll clean and stitch him, and I think a tetanus shot is in order tonight. All that'll probably take about 20 minutes. So how about you come back in, say 40 minutes or so. Give us a little time for a chat. Mr. H nodded and turned to leave the room. Wait! They both turned to me quickly, like they thought something was wrong. I didn't realize how panicky I sounded. I tried to moderate my voice. I'd rather you stay here if you don't mind. Mr. H grinned. Don't mind at all, Are you sure you don't want me to go get you a soda or a chocolate bar? No, I'm fine. I ended up getting 15 stitches and a tetanus shot, but they weren't as painful as having to repeat my story for the second time in one day. After years of having no one to really talk to, having so many people act interested started to freak me out. I really didn't want to talk, and I know I snapped at Dr. Morse more than I should have, but he was pretty understanding about it. I was glad he let Mr. Hassler stay with me. That way I wouldn't have to tell my story again.